I'm delighted to be here with you today. It's really wonderful to have a chance to speak to people who care about the exact same thing that I do, and we're all a community of people in this room who are deeply concerned about helping people to have joyful, fulfilling, rewarding careers. And we know and have seen all of the different ways that people can be impeded in realizing that goal. And one of the through lines is, as Nicole said in her introduction, what is the story that we tell ourselves? And what is the story that we articulate to the outside world about who we are, about what we do, about what we contribute to the world, and about what the coherence of our pathway is? One really basic feature of careers that people often lose sight of, particularly if they're in a moment of stress, is the fact that careers are long. You talk to somebody who's in a state of burnout, or who's being forced out by a partner, or who is losing their job because their firm is being acquired, and the sense that careers are long tends to disappear. Everything is happening right now, and I need some help. I need a shift, I need a strategy, I need a tool to get me out of this or to move me on to the next thing. But actually, career self-management is not a choice. It's not the application of a tool. It's a set of core competencies that we apply each and every day over the course of our working lives in order to have something that I call a sustainable career. So this is a concept I've been working with for many years. I did my dissertation on career success at Cornell in the late 90s and early aughts. And since then, I have been helping people to have fulfilling, sustainable careers in a variety of capacities: as a management professor, as a coach, as a speaker, a workshop leader, a consultant, a person who writes and communicates the importance and what's involved. And for me, a sustainable career has four main elements. There is the element of alignment of the content of your work with what you really care about, your interests, your strengths, your motives, your values. And that's something that isn't a one-time choice of, I like science, therefore engineering. It's a day-to-day, year-to-year process of honing, tuning, what is it I'm doing, and does it really align with what is going to drive me at this stage of my career? Because it may be that what was the perfect alignment 10 years ago has lost a little juice. There's also the element of ongoing growth and renewal. So a fundamental competency for me of crafting a sustainable career is about always reflecting, always drawing lessons, finding ways to continuously learn, to be intentional and aware and conscious of the learning that we do. That's a meta competency. It's not you go and you do your executive MBA, boom, learning is done, now I work. Learning is a day-to-day process. The third element is about well-being and work-life fit, meaning, does my portfolio of work activities, does the work that I do and the conditions in which I do it support my well-being? And does it fit together and complement the other things that are important to me in my life at this stage? There are times that the most important thing is that we are challenging ourselves as much as possible at work, that's what's really driving us. There are other times that we may have a lot of caregiving responsibilities outside of work, or we may have something that's really speaking to us that we want to give a lot of our attention and our energy to. Can we harmonize that with the work that we're doing? And then finally, the fourth element of a sustainable career is about adaptability and achieving security through the ability to adapt. Through our networks, can we access information about opportunities and ways that we can create value for someone who is willing to pay us for that value? Are we able to shape our interpersonal relationships in such a way that we don't come to that point in our careers where we think, oh, I've done this for 25 years, but now what? What can somebody who's done that do except that? I don't know anybody else outside of that field. So that security through adaptability is the final element. Okay, so what I try and do, and I'm sure what many of you try and do, is to help people have that sustainable, dynamic career. So let's talk about narrative. We are wired for narrative. Psychologists refer to human beings as meaning-making machines. And this is how our brains are structured. That through our perception, we pick up elements. If we see a partial picture that has some elements that represent a whole behind it, but we don't see the entire picture, our brain will sketch that together. We do a similar thing in terms of trying to give meaning and coherence to what we experience in the world and to the way that we experience ourselves. So, if I encounter a colleague who treats me in a certain way, maybe they're self-protective, maybe they don't share information, I make up a story about what's happening there. It might be this person has it out for me. It might be this is a hostile environment. It might be this person doesn't think I'm worthwhile or high potential. So we make these kinds of stories up as we move through our lives. And then we apply the filter, the lens that we have, our narrative lens, and we use that to interpret new things in the future. I had said to myself, I won't invoke politics, but there's an interesting, just because in the United States there's such a profoundly fascinating psychological case study in high leadership. And for the topic of narrative psychology, what we see is a person who has a very distinctive narrative line that he applies. You know, it's that the world is a dangerous place. Other people want to take from me. I have to protect, I have to defend, I have to vanquish my enemies. There is no cooperation. It's about me being strong. And so you see that actually getting translated into national policy, into international relationships. It's an interesting example of how an inner narrative plays out with geopolitical implications. And similar things happen at a much, much more micro level when we think about managing our careers. So our stories can liberate us. Learn how to recognize the stories that you tell yourself, how to shape them in a way that gives you options, that gives you freedom and power, and you can create a sustainable career. You can create what you want. You can find fulfillment. Frame them in such a way that they take away your capacity and your power to act on your own behalf, or that they frame you as a victim of a noxious or ill-intentioned set of circumstances, and you get stuck, and you're disempowered. And so it's really important. A lot of times people skip over that. People are engaging in this process of making up stories without being aware of it. That's the thing that's so slippery about it. Because we come to our explanations of what's happening in our careers, and we believe that the way that we have arrived at those explanations is through a process of logic, that I have observed what's going on, I've taken in all the data, I've done an analysis, and I can tell you that this is what is happening, when actually it's just one possible storyline. So trying to help people and support them in becoming aware of the narratives that we apply offers a huge amount of leverage for increasing people's capacity to create the kind of career that they want. And that's one of the things that I try and do with everybody who I work with in coaching and in a lot of the executive education I do, is to help people become more aware of the assumptions that they're bringing to a situation, the kind of explanation, the kind of story that they're making up and telling, and be able to question that and say, is this serving me? If it's a team or a company, is this serving us? Because the storylines that we make up as leaders have a big impact on how effective our organizations are as well. So you can take the notion of story crafting, of narrative awareness and shaping, and apply it to more macro environments as well. All right, so I'm going to tell you about a few different cases I've selected from different people I've worked with, some different storylines and different ways that they've shifted, before and after stories. But I want to start with this. Are you familiar with this lovely, empowering quote from the former First Lady of the US, Eleanor Roosevelt? "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." What a wonderfully empowering notion. It's false. And here's why. Because we're not strictly self-created. Over 100 years ago, the sociologist Charles Cooley wrote about the notion of the looking glass self. Those of you who have taken sociology might remember that. And in fact, our self-concept is created not strictly by some upwelling of our own thoughts about ourselves, but by what we experience in interaction. What do we get back from other people? You know, this is why the notion that people in poverty should pull themselves up by their bootstraps doesn't quite work when you put one of those people next to someone who's come from an environment that's been much more enriching. Because we get back messages about our capacity, about our worth, about what is possible for us, and we incorporate those in our self-image. And so while we cannot, and I don't recommend, that we somehow encourage people to shut out the outside world, what's important here is that we simply are aware that this is part of the process, that this is partly how our notions of what we can do get shaped. So I'm going to introduce you to one of my clients, Lynn. Lynn is, and I'm so proud of Lynn. I'm so proud of every one of my clients. I get such a kick out of seeing people step into their strengths and their power, own it, and create what they want. So Lynn is a marketing and communications professional. Background in journalism. Early in her career was a hard-hitting reporter for the Baltimore Sun. Went off overseas for a while, took a second degree, ended up working in marketing abroad, came back to the US with her husband, and was working at a communications unit of a major research university, specializing in science, engineering, technology issues, working with different academic departments to help them tell their stories and translate their stories about what they're doing and creating and make that knowledge available for the public and granting agencies and alumni and so forth. Super talented, very ambitious. So she comes back and she gets in this job, and her supervisor was not quite up for her level of ambition and proactivity. I'm making this diagnosis third hand, but from many conversations with Lynn, I think that this was what was happening. This happens a lot, right? Leaders are a little, woo, this person's on fire, I'm not sure how to deal with them. So Lynn really had the aspiration of growing in a job that would use her strengths. So I'm using here this diagram that you see. It's reproduced on one of your handouts, and I'm drawing here on Work in Narrative Coaching by Dr. David Drake, who has a phenomenal book on this topic. And the idea here is that when we want to create something, we have some aspiration. We're starting in an old story. When we find ourselves stuck, it's because the narrative that we are creating and living and carrying out does not empower us to reach our aspiration. So Lynn here has her aspiration. She wants to grow in a job that engages her strengths. She's got a lot to offer. And unfortunately, she's in a job situation where this potential value is not being recognized by her supervisor. In fact, she's really being tamped down. Her supervisor is actually sending her a lot of negative messages about, well, I don't think you're ready to take this on. What are you talking about? You said you were overwhelmed last month. Why would you want to take on something else, et cetera? When Lynn is proposing, I could do this or that, I really would like to learn, et cetera. And so over several months of working together, what we did is to help her to shift that whole narrative away from the notion that I have to work through my supervisor. She's the gateway. She has to see what I'm capable of, believe in me, give me opportunities. That's how I'm going to grow. And because that wasn't happening, and because, in fact, the messages she was getting back were that, no, you don't have potential. Slow down. I don't want you being this proactive. That it was really diminishing her sense of self. That she was saying to me things like, and oh, by the way, she's a 50-year-old breast cancer survivor and feeling like, am I too old? Is it just, this has passed me by? I'm going to have to content myself with work that's not really what I could be doing, feeling really stressed, really stuck. And so we were working on, 3 different things. What's the mindset that she's bringing to this situation? What's the story she's telling herself? What does she believe? And she was, starting off at this kind of old story, this negative story about, I don't think I really have the ability to get what I want in my career. So the older mindset was, it's all dependent on my supervisor. Somebody's got to open a door for me. Somebody's got to give me the chance. Otherwise, I'm stuck. And the shift for her was I can create the career I want. I'm not dependent on anybody else. I have skills, I have strengths. I'm going to apply those in order to demonstrate my value to the outside world and to obtain work that is rewarding to me. And so that, of course, you can't just have the mindset, you have to have behaviors as well. And so the behaviors that she started working on and using regularly was really connecting to those strengths and using them in interactions to demonstrate her value. So she ended up leaving her job, and she was getting the message pretty distinctly that she was going to be fired, and so she decided to go ahead and be proactive and not have that axe fall, but to choose to do that. And felt pretty liberated right away because she had been doing the work of really connecting to hey, I'm a powerful communicator. I have this ability to take highly complex scientific topics and translate them into a way that's very engaging, very accessible, interesting to the general public, to policymakers and funders and so forth. And that is a very, very valuable skill. Imagine all the ways that skill can be applied in all the different types of organizations that would love to find somebody who has that skill. And so the more she started networking, and as somebody with a background as a reporter, she's super comfortable calling people on the phone, asking questions, engaging in conversations, setting up meetings. That's part of her, her basic toolkit, that wasn't something that was intimidating for her. So she started connecting with people in startups, in other academic departments, in firms that have products they're trying to take to market, and talking about what she was able to do and the types of things she was able to do. And what this was producing was a positive feedback loop where people would see what she had to offer and respond to her in a way that was completely different from the way her boss was responding to her. So she was getting this positive reinforcement, whereas previously she had been experiencing feedback that said, no, you don't have much to offer, pipe down. And so it really set up this self-reinforcing loop. And then she put some other conditions into place that enable her to perform at her best, rented a co-working space, had other professionals around her, started attending networking events and so forth, decided to keep regular hours so that in this transitional time of setting up her own business, it wouldn't feel too strange. It would feel like she was going to a regular job. And all these things are really supporting her success. And her business is growing, and she feels phenomenal. And so this is about noticing what's happening to you, noticing that the conditions that you're in, which don't support you showing up at your best, don't support you performing at your peak, are really getting into your mind and into the way that you think about yourself and into the way that you conceptualize what's actually possible for me. So making these shifts really enabled her to get back on a forward pathway. So I'm super proud of Lynn. And she has given me permission to share her story. So her name is Lynn Anderson Davey. She's a phenomenal marketing consultant. She's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. If you know anybody who needs that kind of work, look her up. All right. So career success is, of course, multidimensional. When people come out of an MBA program and they're 28, here I'm kind of mapping the terrain of career success. So early on in a professional career, we tend to be focusing up here in the domain of objective, verifiable, tangible indicators of success that are validated by other people, things that are interpersonal. What's your salary? What's your bonus? How fast are you being promoted? Are you making partner? Et cetera. These things that legitimate people in front of an audience that they're interested in and are objective, extrinsic indicators of success. Since many of the people you work with are older, are more experienced, maybe have stepped back a little bit from that sense that I have to be out there crushing it, you might have people who are more investing, more focusing on what's my sense of satisfaction with my work? How does the work I'm doing support my well-being, my capacity to engage with my family, to invest in relationships I care about? What kind of legacy am I constructing? So that's down in the domain of more subjective indicators of success and things that are more personal, more about intrapersonal rather than interpersonal with other people. And then we've got the other quadrants here, things that are objective, but more about subjective satisfaction. It might be development. It might be gaining a certain credential, creating something, having a creative accomplishment that I feel really positive about, and that serves as an indicator of my growth. There are elements of career success and satisfaction that are also more about how we interact with other people, although they're more subjective. So, do I work in a firm where I have wonderful collaborative relationships, where the engagement that I have at work, I get recognized, I get acknowledged, coming to work and working with this team helps me to be the person I want to be. And so one thing I find when working with clients, it's useful to get them to step back and map a little bit, where are the important elements of success for me? Am I overly investing in a narrow set? And so if something happens there, does that mean I'm now a failure? So the broader the foundation, the more resilient the person. And this kind of points to the inside game and the outside game of career self-management. What are we doing, and how important is that interpersonal element? How much focus are we putting on convincing others that we're successful, on making sure that we are living up to other people's what other people, perhaps parents, perhaps colleagues, friends have said, well, you've been in this business for 20 years. You're at the peak of your earning power right now. You'd be nuts to give that up. Why would you ever do something else? That is really tough to be stuck there. And so there are an awful lot of people that I encounter who look really successful and who come to me saying, I'm miserable. I can't take this. I'm convinced I've saved a few lives, and I'm sure some of you have as well. I've had more than one client who's been in a state of advanced burnout and has said, I cannot imagine me as a managing director. How could I possibly say I'm giving this up? Everybody would think I had lost my mind, and I'd become that guy who lost his mind and left the firm. You know what would be easier? Cancer. Because then I could leave, and there would be an excuse that people would accept. If I could just have an accident that was not enough to kill me, but I could be in the hospital and nobody would expect me to be here, and it would be a legitimate reason to rest, to take some time off. That is the kind of symptom of the inside game of career self-management has gone off the rails. And that has to do with narratives. So another story I want to share, and this story is written up in the piece that you have on your table from Harvard Business Review, is in fact a managing director at a high prestige firm, who I'm calling Chris here, who came to me because he was concerned he was going to die. His doctor said to him, you're going to die if you don't make a change. He was in his late 30s. Resting heart rate never fell below 100 beats per minute. So stressed. Fighting maybe to get 3 hours of sleep every single night. Extremely sleep deprived. So just hanging by a thread, yet having to show up as the lead partner on advising companies on huge deals, having to get on a plane day after day, when he just wasn't sure, am I still going to be alive? And so he said, I've got to make a change. I want to be here for my family. I want to save my health. I want to save my life. And this work that I've done so well at does not hold any juice for me any longer. It doesn't mean anything to me. He had come out of his MBA program, boom, done fantastically well. Great success for the career services people. Boom, into this great firm, et cetera, went right up the ladder. And he felt so loyal to his boss. He had somebody who had taken him under his wing, and this guy had mentored him for the 15 years he had been at that firm. And so that was the story that was keeping him stuck. I'm loyal to my boss no matter what. He talked about the culture of the firm as this alpha male culture. We'll do whatever it takes. We don't get tired. We don't get hungry. We don't lose focus. We deliver for our clients. And on the basis of that narrative, he had done phenomenally well. And his boss was even more into that line of thinking. And so the tension was, he was saying to his boss, I'm in trouble. And his boss was saying to him things like, take a week off. Go to the beach. That's all you need. You'll be fine. And he was trying to say, I think I might need more than that. And had even initiated some conversations around, can we redesign my job within the firm so that I don't have to travel so much, so I don't have the same level of pressure, so I can use my skills, but in a way that can support me being healthy. And the boss was just kind of like, are you losing it? And meanwhile, there had been this sense of other people had previously left the firm, and then the boss would always talk about them like, oh, they were really never meant to be here long term. They weren't the kind of material we're looking for. And he just could not. He was really trapped by this idea. The most terrifying thing for him was having a conversation with his boss in which he would say, I am burned out, and I can't do this anymore, and I need to make a significant change. And so that was what we were working with him on through our coaching, was learning to pivot from this sense that this is what success looks like. It's the way I've been living for the last 15 years to actually I'm now changing my definition of success. My success is about my health. It's about being able to have a great relationship with my wife, being there for my son, and it's about finding a way to do the work, to use my skills, to do work that means something to me. Because a lot of people also get stuck in this sunk costs fallacy. Like in investing, you stay with something, you've lost a ton of money, but you don't want to switch that investment because it's like, I've already lost so much, I have to get that back. It's the same thing that keeps people at the poker table hours after they should have left. Same thing happens in careers. I've put 15 years into this. I'm going to lose the value of this experience. I can't throw that away. But actually, no matter what the experiences that we've had, there's so much that can be harvested from that and applied to a wide variety of things. And so we helped him with that as well, to see, how do I take this and really add value? And sometimes when you switch into a slightly different field, what you have to offer is more valuable because it's now diverse knowledge. It's not the same knowledge that everybody else in the firm has. You have something unique and different to bring. So for Chris, it was really about learning to observe and reflect on what he was experiencing. Being in a presentation and having a panic attack because a client had asked a question that he didn't have the answer for at the tip of his fingers, and then beating himself up over that for the rest of the day. Learning instead to recognize what's happening and to be intentional about shifting it in a way that worked better. Learning to say, that's an important question. I want to give that a little bit of time. What else, and let's hear what other perspectives people at the table have on it, things like that. And learning to keep refocusing, because he did a lot of work about really getting clear about what is it I want. What do I want my life to look like? So a lot of refocusing, coming back to that new anchor and slowly untying the line from the old anchor, which was what was keeping him stuck. And so he ended up actually finding a new job with a firm where he was able to join an interesting educational startup to do work that he felt a lot more excited about, that this was something that was meaningful, that he was contributing something, and he found a way to use his skills. So he was another happy story. So another key point, simple, subtle but profound, is focus on what you're moving toward. Because when somebody is at a moment, an inflection point in their career, a lot of times the focus is all about, what do I not want? What do I want to get rid of? What do I want to avoid? And it can be a real relief to articulate that and to make some change that gets you out of that toxic environment or off that plane every Monday morning at 6 o'clock or whatever the irritant or set of irritants is. Yet to really sustainably shift your narrative, you must have, what's that beacon? Where's the light that I'm moving towards? And so it's really important, I think, I know whenever I talk to people who are having a crisis or unhappy about something in their career, to make sure that we're spending a lot of time on getting clear on what am I creating, because that's what pulls the new narrative. That serves as kind of the homing point, the point of focus that you can keep returning to. You really need to have that, what is it that I want? What is it that I'm creating? That's a pretty common theme. So let me introduce you to Dan. Dan, who's a software professional. Dan is a company man. He has worked for the same company for over 20 years, which is interesting in a fast-moving software field. Fundamentally, he stayed with his company because he really loves the technology. He finds it exciting. He finds it intellectually interesting. It's been constantly in a state of evolution. He loves that. He's got a very scientific mind. No, he's not a programmer. He doesn't come out of that background. His twin loves are computer science and linguistics. And what he really loves, the field is voice recognition technology, and what he really loves is being able to understand what a company is trying to create, to help them to design a high-level solution, and to be able to articulate to people who are non-scientists what this technology can do and how it can connect to the human problems you're trying to solve. This is what it's going to look like. Clients find him incredibly comforting to talk to. They get, oh, now I finally understand. And so his firm, about 15 years ago now, actually, this is a kind of an old story, but it's a story that's been sustained, so it's a nice one, was acquired by its chief competitor. So Dan had crafted a position that he was pretty happy with. Company gets acquired, and his job stays the same. Job title is the same. But in the new organization, the type of work that he's doing has actually become much less technical, much less scientific, and much more administrative. And now he's being asked to do all these proposals and statements of work and all of this much more kind of project management-y type stuff, which is not his strength at all. And so now he finds, okay, now I'm in this new organization where these people don't know me quite as well, they don't know my value, they don't know what's unique about me, and they're telling me this is my job and this is what I have to do. I don't like it. I'm not good at it. My trajectory is going to go downhill. I don't know what's going to happen for me here, and I'm now, I'm being separated from the science that really is what sparks my intellect. And so that was his challenge. What do I do about that? How do I actually find a way to regain some control? Because Dan is a big autonomy lover. He wants to use his skills and his strengths to create his work, to find a way to apply his talents to create some value that's going to give him the ability to choose what he does, basically, to choose how he contributes and the conditions of his work. And so that's what he did. He was able to do that. He didn't want to be stuck. And so he kind of did an inventory of what are the ways that I contribute, what are my unique strengths, and really focused in on what is the high value, unique knowledge and capital that I bring to this firm. And he did a little bit of research to find out, to kind of map out the landscape of other competitor firms and what kinds of positions existed at the time. And he actually found that there was an emerging role that had been created at some competitors that really encapsulated everything that he loved to do. And so he proposed to his own company, why don't we create this position and put me in it? Because this is exactly what I do. And at this time in our growth, what we really need is people who can communicate across the whole spectrum of technical people and business people and help people to really see the potential of this technology. And it worked phenomenally well. And now for the past 15 years, he's been doing exactly this. He's an incredibly valuable person in his company. He's an individual contributor, director level individual contributor, because of the fact that he has this knowledge and this capacity to learn, and codify things like nobody else. And he is the person that gets called in on very important client arrangements, new deals that are being worked on, because he's super valuable at working with clients and creating that understanding. And so that's the hallmark of his sustainable career, that he keeps being able to do work that he loves. He maintains control over the conditions of his work. He gets to work with people who are really, really central. So he's not at all, even though he's remote, he's not at all shunted off to the side. He maintains connection with the heart of the firm. And so that, for him, it's been this shift that I can actually leverage these skills. I own my skills, and I can leverage them to add value and create the work that I want to do. So, good for Dan. All right, probably the most common piece of career advice that I give to people I work with is to really pay attention to what energizes you and what diminishes you, and make sure you're increasing your exposure to those things that are energizing. Invest yourself in the tasks, the environments, the relationships, the activities that are providing you with this positive feedback loop that you think, yes, this is me at my best. And also be aware of what are the things that are not conducive to your performance and to your well-being, and try and reduce, to the extent that you can, your exposure to those things. And this starts with observing. It starts with being aware, not just of your deliverables and what you're getting done every day, but the quality of your experience. All right, so let me tell you about Alberta. She's a different type of population than probably most of the people you work with. Alberta is a mid-level manager in a global humanitarian organization. She has spent a lot of time out in the field, in conflict zones, living and working in conditions that we would experience as deprivation, doing work that she really felt called to do, and that is very, very meaningful to her, the kind of work where she actually is really saving lives and lifting people who are in poverty and suffering to a higher level of living. And so after many years of being out in the field doing this kind of work, she came back to headquarters. Now, you would think this would be a great thing, that you've been living in a place where you only have electricity 4 hours a day. Oh, now I get to go and live in a modern city, fantastic. And actually, it's really tough when you've been in this kind of field for a long time, because it's way less meaningful, and it's way more bureaucratic, and it's actually a kind of a dangerous moment for people in this career path. So when I started working with Alberta, she was feeling incredibly frustrated by generally this really malaise in the organization. This sense of everybody being very aware of what they were unhappy with, what they, what their grievances were, nobody wanting to kind of step up and take charge to create something positive. And with her role, she was kind of the focal point for all of this complaining. And she, her mindset was basically, this isn't fair. It's not fair that I have to be the sponge that receives all this. Other people come, they put their problems on me. Now I'm responsible for trying to solve their problems that they say they can't do anything about. I care about this work, and I'm more and more separated from the work, and it's just not fair, and it's wearing me down. So her aspiration was, how do I really create resilience? Because she did care about the work, and she did believe in the organization and its mission. But how, is it a question of how do I just get through week after week when, it's just a constant barrage of problems coming up, and I'm not actually doing much that contributes to the real work of the organization, the real what drives me here, why am I here? And so that was the story that was hanging her up. And so what we did in working together was to shift her to really be paying attention to what creates a sense of progress. So progress, it turns out, there's some research from Harvard Business School, from Teresa Amabile and her husband Stephen Kramer, on the progress principle. And it turns out that one of the most motivating conditions we can be in is to have the sense of making progress at work that is meaningful to us. So I always say this when I'm doing leadership programs: if there's one thing you can focus on as a leader, every single day, look for progress. How can I facilitate a sense of progress, even a tiny step forward, at something that's meaningful for our team? And so this was the principle she was applying to herself, and that she was applying in all of her interactions with her team. That for people who were feeling stuck, who were feeling frustrated, that she became this advocate for always highlighting the positive, always highlighting progress, kind of parting the curtains a little bit for the complaints and the sense of stuckness, and helping people to connect to what they were doing that was actually having a good impact and actually serving the organization's mandate. And she learned that it's really vital for herself to do this as well. So she's been practicing making shifts in the moment from, becoming aware of that narrative of it's not fair, which is exactly the same victim type of frame that her team members are experiencing, and shifting that to I can energize, that I can highlight progress, I can pull it out. And the more she shines a light on progress, the more she connects people to their progress, the more progress happens. And it's a very self-reinforcing cycle. So she hasn't left the organization. That was not on the table. She didn't want to kind of say, get me out of this job, let me find something that's, there's no strife and complaints. She wanted to know, how do I invest myself and build myself up so that I'm resilient, and use that capacity to start to change, if not the organization as a whole, at least my part of it. Because it can be pretty tricky when you're a mid-level manager. You don't have the level of responsibility or visibility where you can say, new plan, everybody, get on board, this is our new culture, but you have to work with what's there. So that was her set of pivots. All right. And identity is a work in progress. So Chris, who had been this alpha male consultant and shifted to become more of I'm a healthy, thriving, engaged with my family, doing something meaningful, that was an identity shift. All of these people have had identity shifts. Identity is a work in progress. It's never done. It's always changing. And that's part of the narrative as we move forward in our career, is who am I becoming, and what are the things that the person I'm becoming does? How does that person behave? How does that person think? And stepping into that identity and using that to reinforce the narrative. So I'm going to end with one more story, and that's my story, just to give you an idea of who the heck is this person and how did she end up standing at the front of this room. So my background, not my first career, but my second or third, was as a full-time management professor. As you've heard already, I did my PhD at Cornell at the School of Industrial and Labor Relations. Big research one school. You go to a PhD program like that, and the identity that you are given is you are a researcher, and you are in this world to publish in top-tier scholarly journals. And success for you is getting a job in a Research One university, which I did. I got my first job, tenure-track job at Boston College. Left the pastoral, yet cold, but that's okay, wonderland of Ithaca, New York, where my family and I were very happy, moved to the Boston suburbs, got on the tenure track, didn't quite cut it, to be totally honest. 2 little kids, bought a house way out in the suburbs, kind of the commute and everything wasn't for me. So, but then what happened was, 6 years in, I decided, I don't think I'm going to put myself forward for tenure because, they told me how many top-tier papers I have to have, and I don't have that many. So I ended up taking a job in France. I got hired as a full professor at a management school in France. So at this point in time, my husband and I, our daughters, who are now 12 and 15, sell our house in America, pull up stakes, everything in a shipping container, off we go to France, where I encounter a really different educational system, really different sense of what is learning, what's the relationship between the educator and the student, and what is it like to work in a French organization, and all this. So I gave it a go for 6 years, actually. I think I held up pretty well. And it just, I would say what happened to me over time was, there was a fairly clear from the outset lack of fit between my values, particularly as an organizational psychologist. I am all about developing human potential and helping people to be self-aware and to be proactive and create what they want and thrive. This is not how I would describe basic French management culture. It's a little different. And so over time, ultimately what happened was I burned out. I really burned out. I kind of, at the beginning, I was like, I don't know about this. Is this going to work? I gave it a go. I really did. I put everything into it. I tried to craft my job to make sure I was, doing some of the things I told you about, doing more of what I love, proposing I can add value by doing this. That worked for a while, and then things started to go a little sour. So at the end, it got to the point, quite frankly, where I was kind of managing my reactions with a combination of Ativan and rosé at the end of the day, which isn't really particularly sustainable. As my husband once said to me, you are taking up all of the emotional space in this relationship. And my 16-year-old daughter, who was pretty wired herself, was kind of like, oh, geez. So, it was all sort of coming to a head. So now here's my problem. I'm living on the French Riviera, okay? No complaints there. I have invested massively, my family has invested massively in coming there. It's not easy when you have made a big international move and you've really invested a lot of your financial capital, sold our house in Massachusetts in 2009 for less than we bought it for in 2003 and all of this kind of thing. And plus, I was a professor. I loved being a professor. I loved kind of, having the title of professor. I loved going to conferences. I loved, giving talks and all this kind of thing. I thought, well, what now? My husband was like, I'm not leaving. I went to Ithaca with you. I went here. I went there with portable spouse. Fantastic. Get one. But he's like, I'm on the Riviera now and I don't want to leave. And I was like, okay, I get that. I don't particularly want to leave the Riviera either, but there are no other jobs for me here. And also, if I'm not a professor, who am I? What now? One does not just go and get a PhD when one has 2 small children on a whim. This is a pretty rocky road. So, okay, now what? All right, so I go, well, finally, I said, if I want to survive, I have to leave. So I did leave, and I said, okay, what do I want to do now? What is my aspiration? What do I want? I want to have joy. I want to do work that's meaningful. I want to apply my skills. I want to do the kind of work that I thrive at, where I'm best, where I can create something of value, and I want to have joy in my life. I don't want to be anxious anymore. I don't want to be coping, trying to make it. If I have enough vacation, will this be okay? Can I survive? No. I don't want there to be any survival mode in my career. And this is actually what I have been able to create. I've been fortunate, and it's taken a lot of self-coaching. And I'm not, averse to calling up my friends in my coaching network saying, man, I'm having this thing happening next week and I really need spot coaching, because you know how it is when you have career coaches as friends. You can pull in that kind of chip and do it for other people. And so what I do now is I have a portfolio of work activities. I coach, I have my own coaching clients. I'm affiliated with the UN System Staff College, which is in Turin, Italy. I'm headed there tonight for some leadership development programs. So I do a lot of executive education. I work with people all over the world. I find myself coaching people in places like Syria or Democratic Republic of Congo or Kazakhstan, whatever. Plus, I work with a few different business schools to deliver executive education and career stuff. I write for Harvard Business Review. I don't write anymore for scholarly publication. I write for people for whom my knowledge can make a difference in their lives and in their performance as leaders. And every single professional interaction I have is positive. I don't have any more stressful professional interactions in my life anymore. I am living a post-bullshit career, is one way I like to think of it, not just a sustainable career. And I do this career from my base on the French Riviera in a mountain at the base of in a village at the base of a mountain that I hike up every day with a view of the Mediterranean. And follow me on Instagram if you like. It's really pretty there. It's Work Life Prof. So that is my story, and it could have gone two different ways, right? Because what was happening to me as I was still in that organization and thinking, well, I'm a professor. That's my identity. What am I going to do? And I was looking ahead, looking at people in the organization and thinking, what's my trajectory if I stay here? It looked pretty bleak. It looked like it was going to be a trajectory of a lot more Ativan, a lot more rosé, a lot more complaining to all of my friends at every dinner party I went to about how miserable I was, and a sense of being diminished. And so my pivot was to really say, I'm actually going to design, I'm going to engineer for joy. And by doing the work that I love, and it comes back to me and it keeps developing, keeps me growing. So that's my story. And so we can tell, we tend to tell one of two different types of stories. The psychologist, Dan McAdams, has done a lot of work on narratives. And he's done these studies where he's asked people, just talk about your life, talk about your career, tell me what's happened, and tell me those stories. And when people tell stories of contamination, it might be, I worked for a company where the politics were brutal, and it really took a toll on me, and that's why I got divorced, and that's why I'm still searching, at age 55 to try and find some happiness. That type of narrative has a huge impact on our overall well-being and on what we see as possible for ourselves and on the kind of energy that we transmit to the people with whom we come into contact. The other category of story is a story of redemption, and that takes the obstacles, the hardships, the unexpected twists and turns on that roadway and finds a way to come through them and to use them as learning. I'm delighted that I burned out. It was brutal. I wouldn't have wanted it to go on any longer, but without it, I wouldn't be here today, and I'm thrilled. And so this is the kind of work that I try and do, and that I think that by helping people to understand the narratives that they bring to understanding their careers and to moving their careers forward, you can find a lot of leverage, and you can really empower people to create a career that is sustainable and that will give them the satisfaction and the kind of impact that they want to have in the world. Laurie, what is something that you would like to create or develop in your work or your career at this time?
Yeah, no, it's perfect timing. As some people here know, I've just completed the classwork at Georgetown's leadership coaching program. And I've been in the career office at HBS 12 or 13 years. The program is very much informing my career coaching, but I'm also exploring becoming a leadership coach side gig. We don't live on the coast of France. I live in Boston. Mm-hmm. But I'm an individual contributor, and I have the space to do this. So hearing you talk this morning, it's very much resonating, because I'm at this point where I can explore.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just interested in brainstorming, having you ask me brilliant coaching questions to see what comes up.
So you're interested in adding leadership coaching to your portfolio of work, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what's important about that to you?
As in career coaching, that space you can create for someone as a leadership coach is magical. So being able to continue to do that in this additional dimension of coaching is what I seek.
And what specifically about leadership coaching? Tell me about how this would help you to grow.
Great question. To me, part of the essence of leadership coaching is when someone either knows the space that they want to stretch themselves in, or if they're not sure, if you can help them discover it, and being their partner. I mean, it happens because of what they discover in themselves, but as a leadership coach, if with your right powerful questions, you can help them unlock it. So that's what I first think of.
I see you turning that key.
Yes, you do. Somatics.
Nice.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So what could this work create?
Meaning, what could this work create? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what is it that you'd like this work to create in the world?
More happy professionals who are really doing what most meaningful to them. I mean, we all use the word meaningful, but if someone has lost what that means for them, to help them regain it or to discover it in a new way.
So how are you thinking about making this not so much transition, but addition at this point in time?
I mean, in all honesty, I haven't yet focused on that because I'm in the process of getting the additional hours for certification, writing my paper. I just submitted the last recording.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I honestly haven't begun the process of saying, okay, Lori, as a former marketing advertising person, what are you going to do for your business development plan? Which was why our mini conversation was a really great opportunity. At the very least, I will write, I mean, I know my coaching declaration, so that's a good place to start, and then it's about getting the word out there. And I haven't even decided whether I'm comfortable in a soft enough launch where it's just word of mouth, or whether the tried and true, get your website, write the articles on LinkedIn, be a thought leader. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm doing Richard's, open and close.
Well, you'll have some photos from today. You can put right on that website.
So, yeah.
Right, yeah. And how do you see this, how does this represent the next phase of your career? Tell me a little bit about what you see yourself in the coming years.
Awesome question. This would be the 4th chapter of my career. I started as a high school teacher, then I went to business school, became an advertising person, laid off with 50 of my closest friends in this Boston advertising agency, which is when I segued to become a career services person. So now leadership coach would be the 4th generation. And frankly, to be excited in one's almost mid-60s about adopting another chapter, I'm just proud of myself for wanting to become this. And I know whatever version of it I do, it'll be great. It'll be great because I love the work. So I'm just kind of exploring and seeing how it develops.
What a nice place to be, confident.
Speaking of redemption versus contamination.
Yes, to know that it's going to be great.
Yeah.
So what's one thing, maybe, what's an idea of something that you could do as you're finishing up this program to connect with people you might potentially coach?
I think one thing would be literally as simple as picking a group of people who know and respect me and put my offer out there to say, I have basically hung up this shingle, whether it's virtual or not, and inviting them to either refer clients, hire me, what have you. So my belief is, as you asked me that question, that starting in an organic way may be the best first step before putting all the bells and whistles of it around.
What's important to you about starting in an organic way?
Control. And it's so relationship driven that way, that the referrals would be from relationships as opposed to, with all due respect to LinkedIn, it would be in a way more over the transom as opposed to relationship driven.
get this unlocking thing, and then you've got the organic, cultivating. I'm getting secret garden coming to mind. 2 words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what will you do? What do you want to do first?
Yeah. Well, what I want to do is get, of course, the certification deal done, find out that I've passed my recording and done my paper. And then, truly, for me, the first step will be taking this conversation, journaling about it, and within, let's say, by June 1st, commit to the real action plan. Because I'm giving myself time. I'm going to give myself time and let it unfold. So my commitment to you and you all is
Good accountability structure?
is by June 1st to connect with these people who at this point I don't have in my head, but my list, my secret garden list.
Yeah. What kind of person unlocks secret gardens to help people be happier at work?
Someone like me. It's about creating a space for someone where you help them discover. So to me, that kind of person is someone who's empathetic, creative, optimistic, curious, and with you.
That's beautiful. Anything else you'd like to say here?
No, just thank you. Thank you.
you. Thanks,
Thanks very much.
Lori. That's awesome. I love your optimism. Thank you so much. Great. If there are questions, I would be happy, or comments, or conversation seeds that anybody would like to start, I would be happy to hear them. Yes?
I had a question about Lynn, and this is a question.
Should we have a mic?
The question about your first
Yeah.
coachee that you exampled, Lynn, and about her having a boss that she wasn't working well with, who was tamping down her aspirations. But when, and I know that this is it depends answer, but oftentimes I think many of our clients are seeing recurring issues, and it's not always just about leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it needs to be about addressing because maybe the issue is within them. And so do you work on issues like that with Lynn, what was, and I know you primarily let the client drive that, but when is it about getting them to kind of look at what part they are playing in the narrative that's getting written out in their journey?
Yeah, great question. Part of it is about recognizing narrative patterns. So having people recount what has happened to them in their career. How familiar is this place where you are right now? What has happened before? What decision did you make? How do you look back on that? And it was clear that in the case of this particular client, that this was a first time she had ever had this before. That she had had lots and lots of positive relationships with previous bosses, lots of facilitative bosses, and that to me was a sign that this isn't an old story that's coming up and getting recycled. This is about, her challenge here is to recognize kind of impact the conditions that she's experiencing or having on her, and how is she responding to that, and is that serving her? But I would say that when you recognize a narrative pattern, the person who has changed jobs every 2 years and year one is always fantastic, and then there's that inflection point when the boss turns into an asshole, and then comes the denouement or whatever. So I think narrative patterns can be a great clue. Yeah. Other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you help someone move from that victim blame space into action and into a more empowered story?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is what I try and do is to help people to understand the system that they are in and how they contribute to it. So anybody, in a toxic workplace environment, you do a custom leadership program for one organization, so everybody at the tables is from the same organization and knows the same players and culture, et cetera. And there's usually like that one table of complainers who are kind of, this and that. But those people are not simply observers of the culture, they are participants in and sustainers of all that they observe around them. So part of the focus that I bring is a systemic coaching focus. So an understanding who are all of my different stakeholders and what kind of impact am I having through the choices that I'm making. And again, kind of recognizing what are the patterns that are coming up and what is it that you'd like to actually have be different if you wanted to bring that particular reality into being. What would you need to be doing differently? How would you need to be responding differently, even if you're confronted with the same condition or stimulus that has caused you to react self-defensively or with anger or with hostility in the past? What will happen if you go that way versus what will happen if you follow the path that you've just articulated for yourself as being preferable. So, others?
Do you have certain questions that you come back to when you're coaching someone to kind of get the information you need? I mean, it was interesting just listening to your questions, but are there like certain go-to questions that you typically use when coaching someone?
Not so much. I think, one of the best coaching tips I have had in recent years is to always have my question come from the last thing the person said. So I don't have particular formulas or questions. I might have in my mind kind of where are we moving towards. Stay with that unless I see sort of an old pattern coming up, and then maybe I'll shift. I have somebody I'm working with right now who is, like so many of the people that you work with, a serial success, has never failed, and that's terrifying. This particular client is thinking about leaving her firm and joining another firm, but she has a lot of messages about I should stay with the large firm. Success is moving up in the large firm, even though there's more creative work available here. So we've gone through. She's really articulated what are the conditions in which I'm at my best. How do I contribute best? What's it like for me when I'm in a situation that's kind of diminishing, where I don't have the ability to do the kind of work that's intellectually engaging for me? And then there's always the but. What if I'm wrong? My firm must know what's right for me. I could be wrong about all of this. And so that has become we've kind of had to anchor that, like, what do you do when you recognize that impulse coming up to suddenly stop trusting everything that you've just said? And how do you step back and say, no, those things that I just said, I actually know them to be true. And so what do I want to then do with the fact that these are the conditions that I'm in right now, and this is the impact it's having on me, versus these are the conditions I believe I would experience somewhere else, and this is the impact I believe it would have on me. So for her, that kind of pivot is away from recognizing when that not trusting self comes up, and making the choice to trust yourself. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Maybe one more. It's 10:57. Yes, there's a mic floating around. Okay.
Today, people are increasingly interested in contributing and making sure that they use their time efficiently. And I feel like they like practical application. You were talking about leadership sessions that you do. What are some good leadership sessions that you have seen or done that are different and that you feel attendees have got a lot of value out of?
I would say in designing leadership sessions, what I as an educator, my big evolution since leaving a traditional academic role has been to and getting trained and certified and practicing as a coach, has been to step away from a focus on theoretical frameworks into a focus on lived experience. So when I design programs, what I really try and do is to build in activities that give participants immediate feedback about what they're learning. So if I'm teaching, communication skills, I can be talking about if you're saying it's going to have this impact on the audience. It's very different if you have somebody stand up and present, and every single time they say the audience goes because it gives immediate feedback. So I try and do a lot of types of activities, whether it's role plays or teach some sort of framework, but then give people an opportunity to practice whatever it is that I've just explained and to get feedback on that particular skill or working with that particular perspective, and then do some journaling, that type of thing. Sure. Going once, going twice. I want to thank you guys all because it's really like, I feel like you're my people. It's so great. It's so great to, I spend my time with lots of different leaders and different organizations, but rarely do I get to be in front of a room of people who, whose life is all about, as Laurie just articulated so eloquently, helping to unlock, helping people to connect with themselves, to create more thriving and more happiness in organizations. So thank you all for the work that you do, and thank you for your attention. And oh yes, if you do have anything that you'd like to feed back, if you're willing to talk to Nicole for a couple minutes, just for the video, again, that would be extremely useful for you because like Laurie, I'm always in the process of developing my business more and more. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the program.